We will now have General Logan's orders by Ralph Coluntino.
Good morning. It is my privilege to be here today to help in a very small way for all of us to have a better understanding of the history, origin, and true meaning of Memorial Day. Memorial Day, originally called Decoration Day, is a day of remembrance for those who have died in our nation's service. There are many stories as to its actual beginnings, with over a dozen cities and towns claiming to be the birthplace of Memorial Day. There is also evidence that organized women's groups in the South were decorating their soldiers' graves before the end of the Civil War. While Waterloo, New York, was officially declared the birthplace of Memorial Day in May 1966, it is difficult to prove conclusively the origins of this day. It is more than likely that there were simply many, many beginnings, and they all came together when General Logan sent out his General Order Number 11 on May 5th, 1868. General John Logan was the commander-in-chief at that time of the Northern Grand Army of the Republic. With his General Order Number 11, which was first observed on the 30th of May, 1868, flowers were placed at the graves of Union and Confederate soldiers at Arlington National Cemetery. The first state to officially recognize Memorial Day was New York in 1873. By 1890, it was recognized by all of the northern states. At this time, though, the South did not recognize the day at all, and they celebrated the loss of their dead on a different day. It is not important, however, how this day began or where the home of it is. What is important is that Memorial Day was established. It is now celebrated by almost every state in the Union on the last Monday in May. The following is General John A. Logan's Memorial Day Order. The 30th day of May, 1868, is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of those who have given their lives to suppress the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, church, village, and hamlet courtyard in the land. In this observance, no form or ceremony is prescribed, but posts and comrades will in their own way arrange such fitting services as circumstances may permit. We are organized, comrades, as our regulations tell us, for the purpose, among other things, of preserving and strengthening those kind and fraternal feelings which have bound together the soldiers, sailors, and Marines who united to suppress the late rebellion, and they who made their bodies a barricade between our nation and its foe. What can aid more to assure this result, that Memorial Day lives on, than by fully recognizing it until our hearts are cold? Their soldier lives were a revel to a race in chains, and their death a tattoo of rebellious tyranny in arms. We should guard their graves with sacred vigilance. All the consecrated wealth and taste of the nation is but a fitting tribute to these men who gave their lives for our freedom. Let no wanton foot tread rudely on such hallowed grounds. Let pleasant paths invite the coming and going of reverent visitors and fond mourners. Let no vandalism or avarice or neglect or ravages of time testify to the present or to the coming future that we have forgotten as a people the cost of a free and undivided republic. If other eyes grow dull and other hands slack and other hearts cold in this solemn trust, Ours shall keep it, as well as the light and warmth of those who died remain in us. Let us then, at the time appointed, gather around their sacred remains and garland the passionless mounds with the choicest flowers of springtime. Let us raise above them their dear old flag that they saved from dishonor. Let us, in this solemn presence, renew our pledges to aid and assist those who they left in the nation's gratitude, the soldiers, sailors, and Marines, widows, and orphans. It is the purpose of the Commander-in-Chief to inaugurate this observance, with the hope that it is kept up from year to year, while a survivor of the war remains to honor the memory of his departed comrades. He earnestly desires the public press to call attention to this order and lends its friendly aid in bringing it to the notice of comrades in all parts of the country for simultaneous compliance therewith. Department commanders will use every effort to make this order effective. Thank you.
We will now have President Roosevelt's speech by Ralph Coluntino about World War II.
Good morning. At 7:53 a.m. on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, the first assault wave of Japanese fighter planes attacked the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, taking the Americans completely by surprise. The first wave targeted airfields and battleships. The second wave targeted other ships and shipyard facilities. The air raid lasted until 9:45 a.m. 8 battleships were damaged, with 5 sunk. 3 light cruisers, 3 destroyers, and 3 smaller vessels were lost, along with 188 aircraft. The Japanese lost 27 planes and 5 midget submarines, which attempted to penetrate the inner harbor and launch torpedoes. The 3 prime targets, the U.S. Pacific Fleet aircraft carriers Lexington, Enterprise, and Saratoga, were not in the harbor and thus escaped damage. The casualty list at Pearl Harbor included 2,335 servicemen and 68 civilians killed, along with 1,178 wounded. Over 1,000 crewmen aboard the USS Arizona battleship were killed after a 1,760-pound aerial bomb penetrated the forward magazine, causing catastrophic explosions. News of the sneak attack was broadcast to the American public via radio bulletins, with many popular Sunday afternoon entertainment programs being interrupted. The news sent a shockwave across the nation, resulting in a tremendous influx of young volunteers into the U.S. Army. The attack also united the nation behind President Franklin D. Roosevelt and effectively ended the American isolationist movement. On Monday, December 8th, President Roosevelt appeared before the Congress and made this speech, asking for a declaration of war against Japan, calling the previous day a date which will live in infamy. Following is that speech. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate and House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States, along with his colleague, delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message, And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. People of the United States have already formed their opinions and well understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, that always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people, in their righteous might, will win through to absolute victory. I believe that I interpret the will of the Congress and of the people when I assert that we will not only defend ourselves to the uttermost, but will make certain that this form of treachery shall never again endanger us. Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of the people, we will gain the inevitable triumph. So help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since this unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. But I'd like to share with you now a story of one of our greatest acts of heroism in our nation, and one of our most important battles. And I think most importantly, the story of 93-year-old Mr. Paul Fury in the car in the street there. Now, on December 7th, 1941, naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. That same day, many of Beverly's own signed up to fight in the war. Among these were Mr. Paul Fury and Mr. Henry Dix. I was recently given the opportunity and the honor to interview Mr. Fury. I learned a great deal during this interview, things you just don't get in books. Things only those who were there and experienced the death, the carnage, and the horror can understand. He told me about his time on Guadalcanal, and the utter destruction, the malaria, the dysentery, and the lack of food, and the onslaught of the Japanese, and the ultimate price paid by his fellow Marines. I was overwhelmed when he spoke, because I realized that all of us that sleep safely at night as a free people will be in his debt forever. This local hero of Beverly Farms never looked for accolade or reward. He's a proud Marine. I quote from him, "I'm proud of what I did, and I do not regret it." He's a proud man as he should be, a hero from the greatest generation. We're all in the debt of Mr. Fury and the other 48 million who have served our country since 1776. Just after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, with the majority of the United States Pacific Fleet destroyed and at the bottom of the bay, and with the Japanese advancing throughout the Pacific, the decision was made to throw the Marines into battle as soon as their divisions were filled. Naturally, the 1st Marine Division was the first filled, and therefore was the first sent out to the Japanese. The Marines, including Mr. Fury and Mr. Dix, were sent out to New Zealand to await the remainder of their forces and to receive jungle warfare training. All of those who had already enlisted had received their basic training. But in the case of the new Marines, including our local hero of the 1st Division, they were shipped out onto Guadalcanal without any additional training. 11,000 Marines were deployed onto Guadalcanal, with the Navy under heavy fire from Japanese cruisers. Little food or ammo was put ashore with them, as transport ships were taking heavy fire and forced to withdraw. On the first day after the beach landing, the Marines secured an airfield, which they renamed Henderson Field, after the commanding officer of the Marines Scout Bombing Squadron, who was killed at the Battle of Midway. The Marines dug in around the airfield and awaited the Japanese counterattack. They did not have to wait for long. The Japanese tried to cross a small river known as Alligator Creek, just north of Henderson Field. The Japanese were repelled by the Marines, losing hundreds of men, but the battle dragged on. It took an unimaginable time for the Americans to secure Guadalcanal, and the cost was equally unimaginable. The loss of manpower on Guadalcanal was so high that the United States Department of the Navy did not release the figures of the dead for many years, until it was finally published in the book, The Old Breed. Thousands of Marines gallantly gave their lives to stop the Japanese advance, many of them friends and all comrades of Mr. Fury. There's also not a single account of any U.S. servicemen coming off of Guadalcanal without having suffered at least one wound. However, even with American casualties as high as they were, the Japanese were far more severe. The Japanese lost an estimated their entire assault force of 8,000 men. The rest abandoned the island, showing one of the few times where the Japanese retreated from the Americans. Now, Mr. Paul Fury was born in 1920. His family came from Fondi, Italy. He was born and grew up in Beverly Farms, Massachusetts. When the war broke out, his father said to him, "Son, I've made my living in this country. He's kept me safe, and he gave me an opportunity to provide for you children. You will fight to defend it." Mr. Fury enlisted at the post office in Boston the next day. Mr. Fury began in 1942 as a private. He was finally discharged at the rank of Staff Sergeant. He was wounded several times, including being bayoneted by a Japanese soldier and taking a bullet wound to the head. That bullet is still lodged in his head today. He has been awarded multiple Purple Hearts and was honorably discharged from the United States Marines. When he came back from this terrible war, he started a business and a family. He has lived his entire life a proud man. But he was one of the lucky ones. Henry Dix, of whom Dix Park is named just down the street, was Mr. Fury's childhood friend. They went to Guadalcanal, but he was not as lucky as Mr. Fury. after being wounded by a .50 caliber Japanese machine gun. Mr. Dix got back up to keep fighting. He was then shot again, and again he rose. According to the Marines with him, if Mr. Dix had stayed down and waited for the medics, he would have been fine. But he continued to get up and fight. Why would this man do this? Why did he continue to rise? He knew that the job was not finished. He was a Marine. To anyone able to hear the sound of my voice, please, I beg of you, never forget the price that has been paid for our freedom. In our country's history, it has cost over 1.3 million American lives to ensure our freedom. Young people and children only know what they are taught. So please, teach your children what these great men and women have done for our country. Let us never allow future generations to forget the real heroes, like Staff Sergeant Paul Fury, that have helped to make this the greatest nation in the world. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless those who have paid the ultimate price for the United States of America.